Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today. I hope isn't going to be too long because I'm starting it late. So by the time I've done all the processing and YouTube's taking its time to load it, it's going to be blinking dark. Now there is a thing, on this day, is it worth doing a video for Europe? Who's going to be watching YouTube today? Come on, own up. If you don't know what I'm on about, then probably you will be watching YouTube. But basically, there's possibly some good tennis on, and I got a feeling, what was the other thing that was on? I think there was some football or something on. Yes, I am joking. Just been round my sister's, it's her birthday. And her family are nuts on football. There's flags all over the garden, on the hedge, hanging up the trees, So my brother-in-law's got his red and white socks on, but he's got red and white underpants on as well. So they're nuts on the football. And it's my sister's birthday today, so I put on our card. It's really nice of them to actually arrange for England to be in the final and actually play that final on your birthday for you. Yeah, good luck getting some attention this evening, sister. Right, today I thought I'd pick on a few problem plants, have a chat about possibly why they became a problem, might not know in all cases, and what my thoughts were to sort them out, to sort of bring them back, get them going again. And don't forget, one of the options with a problem plant is the bin, which used to endearingly be known as the hedge. You're going under the hedge. But now that I've got a proper recycling bin, I don't do that anymore. It's in the bin now. Right, so a few plants that have been a problem that may or may not still be. And I want to start up here, which is, I haven't prepared this, so you'll have to be patient while I get certain plants down from where they are, or up in some cases, or out from the back in some cases, but that's all part of it. And the first one I want to look at is the Vanda that Hannah got me a long time ago. And as soon as I tip it up like that, it'll become blatantly apparent what's the matter with this. It's absolutely covered in blotches and spots. It's obviously got some sort of infection. Now, when I first spotted this, it seemed to sort of happen relatively quickly, but it happened in the middle of winter, so obviously this wasn't getting taken down and watered that often in the winter. It gets chucked in the bucket. And a lot of the roots have died as well, on top of that. Anyway, I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm blowed if I can, because it's little spots all over, little yellow dots in the main. And I looked at it and I thought, well, I'm blowed if I can see any insects on there. There's no sign of life on there at all. So I wasn't quite sure what to do. But the fact that it was obviously some sort of infection, I sprayed it with a fungicide. And it seemed to be getting worse. And in the end, I got a magnifying glass to it, and there were tiny little white insects all over it. It was smothered. Hundreds and hundreds of them. I still don't know what they were, but an insecticide got rid of them instantly, so they were obviously fragile. And that sorted out the cause. And then I did another spray with fungicide to stop anything getting any worse as far as the infection was concerned. And it seems to have worked. We are now getting cleaner leaves out of the top, and the little kiki at the bottom is growing clean leaves as well recently. But we've got very little root activity on this plant. This plant has gone downhill quite badly, but we do have a spike. We have a spike coming up in that leaf joint. I've only just noticed that. So yeah, so the problem wasn't apparent, because although it was an insect-based attack, they were too small to see. But they were a greyish white colour. It could have been a type of mite. They were wingless, but they were so tiny, even with the magnifying glass. I wasn't counting legs, let's put it that way. But it may well have been some sort of mite, just on that one. Now, where did they come from? Why just on that one? Weird. So that was one that I never really, well, I found the cause, but not really, because the cause was the insects, but really the cause happened prior to the insects' attack. It happened when they came in. Where did they come from? Are they on another plant and I haven't noticed them yet? Well, if they are, I haven't noticed them yet. That's what I just said. Right, so that's that one. That's that one done. You go up. So I'm going to try and get these things back where they go so that I haven't got loads to do after I finish filming. So that's one. Quite a problem, you know, I mean that plant's important to me. You know, Hannah got that for me. She spent quite a bit of money on it when she didn't have any money, really. And got told off for doing it. Right, this one, this is handy. This is my Oncidium verrucosum rogersii variety Baldin. And there's versions of this around that may even be the same thing, because somebody told me that they had, I've got verrucosum variety Baldin without the rogersii bit in it. You see what I mean? So anyway, that's what it was sold as. It went downhill, still don't know why, but it just started shriveling, leaves dropped, and basically the previous two new growths on this have both aborted, just completely faded away, and now we've got one that appears to be pushing on. I think that's big enough that that's going to make it now, and there are some signs of roots coming out of the base, because that's the thing, it's virtually rootless. But there are some, you know, if you look down under here, so there are some that have gone down in the moss and come out here. Well, those won't have separated from the plant, so they're still active roots. So it's got some roots, but what did I do to cure that? Well, it's on a mount. What can you do? Take it off the mount, put it in a pot? Well, when you've got rot issues, I'd say a mount is one of the safest places because it dries. It's not going to have moisture around the base of it all the time. It will on occasions, obviously, when it gets watered. So I think I'm going to get that to recover. But it's now a long, long way from ever seeing any blooms on it again, because I don't think this is going to be a full-sized bulb. When I first got this, the bulbs were this big. And now look what I've got. Tiny little one. It's not totally shriveled, and a tiny little new one forming. So we're probably going to have to grow 2 more growths on top of this one to get the bulbs up to any decent size before it would have the strength to even think about letting it flower. But the chances of me getting that again are probably 0, so I have to do the work. I have to keep going and just hope it will make it. Right, those were the ones I wanted to do straight away. Now we'll move on. Yeah, some things are difficult to say that they are a bit of a problem, but they aren't really. They're no more of a problem than any other flipping orchid, really. Oh yeah, this one. This is, well, it's effectively, it was bought as Cambria Irish Mist. It isn't the true Irish Mist because well, the colours are nothing like what they should be. So it's probably just that particular company's trade name. I think this came out of the Inca base, so one of theirs. Now the problem with this is it's rootless, effectively. I've said that several times. Now I'll have to take it back. It's just showing a couple of root tips. So there are now some branches. These are not new roots. So they must be branches off existing roots. If they were new roots, we'd see some activity near the top of the pot. So bulbs are very shriveled, as you can see, very narrow, very crinkled, very shriveled, but it's maintaining good leaves. so it can feed itself. Yeah. Now there comes a time, it's not so much with leaves, but with canes and bulbs, where you actually think there's more bulbs there than this root system can support, so they will desiccate. And if they desiccate, they're not doing their job. They're not holding nutrients and hydration because they're quarter the size they should be. So the plant itself's got nowhere near its support system that it should have for these leaves. But leaves are self-supporting because they produce, the photosynthesis process produces starches and sugars and things like that in the plant that allows the plant some support. So these have got a job to do. Now when you've got some bulbs that are shriveled badly and they've dropped all their leaves and they've got no roots, in my opinion they go in the bin, because that I can't be bothered with. But you can get new growths to come from back bulb propagation. Yeah, so this is where that's all you've got is a back bulb, no leaves, no new growths, nothing. And a lot of people would possibly stand that in sphagnum moss so that it's got some moisture around the base and patiently wait. Some people actually put those back bulbs in a bag, a sealed bag with some sphagnum moss, and patiently wait. How long before you're going to get blooms on a back bulb propagation? Is it worth it? Can the plant be replaced? Is it something that is irreplaceable? In which case it's got to be worth a go. Yeah. So sometimes when you've got a problem plant, you have to weigh up the effort. Is it worth it? Is it worth the struggle? And the mindset that goes with the struggle. You know, keep looking at it and thinking, oh, it's not doing very well. I think I'm going to lose it. Let it go. Just lose it. Unless it's precious for another reason, like sentimental reasons or something. It's not worth getting all uptight over a plant. Well, I don't think it is anyway. So I'm scanning at the moment, seeing what else we can have a look at. Well, we've been over this one, so it's hardly worth doing it. But as it's a separate video and different people might be watching it than before, this is my Rossio glossum Rawdon Jester. Now, when I got this, we had huge, big, fat, plump bulbs on it, and along the front. Oh, let's turn this round so I can point. Along the front here were 4 strong, plump new growths with their leaves. So that's what I bought. Yeah, and those growths were pushing on nicely. They hadn't yet produced their root system. So the overall plant had very, very poor roots when it was repotted. But I was thinking to myself, the fact that those new growths are pushing on and haven't produced their roots yet, they're going to. They will. And they did. And a slug ate them off. Now, when you get a plant that's in a position that it produces new roots at a particular point in its growth cycle, and you lose that set of roots, you've got to wait for the next growth cycle. Most of the time. Some plants will root from older, will branch out from older root systems, like the Oncidium type we've just looked at, the Cambria. Yeah, that is branching from older roots. Now on this one, that was unlikely to happen. So we had to wait for the next growth cycle, and the next growth cycle is this growth here. And if you look below, we have great big fat root tips going down into the pot. Yeah? And we have another new growth here, and again, new root tips heading down into the pot. So this will create a new root system. Is that root system going to be good enough for that whole plant? And the answer is no. So it's going to be weakened. Yeah? But it will replace some of its root system. The old root system's probably had it long since gone. So it's surviving again on these, which are good. The whole plant is covered in good, strong leaves. So it can feed itself and look after itself for some considerable time while these roots get going. But where we had 4 new growths, as you know when a plant's going downhill, if the previous time it produced its new growths it produced 4, and this time it only produced 2, something is wrong. It shouldn't go backwards. And that's gone backwards by half, only 2 new growths. The reason? Lost its roots. Yeah? It lost its regenerated root system before it could get going. So this will recover, no problem now. I think we've dealt with the slugs. They came in on somebody else's plants basically, and got around a bit before the slug pellets went down and dealt with them. So this will recover. Luckily the pseudobulbs haven't totally desiccated. They've still got some plumpness there. They're not bad. I don't think they're going to plump up to the size they were when I got the plant, but they have recovered a bit. And once this root system progresses even more, they may even plump up a bit more. But the most important thing on this plant, why it survived without its roots, are these up here. The fact that it had a really good leaf system, so it could feed itself. Now it can start getting some nutrients in from the bottom as well through those new roots that are coming out. And if those new growths attempt to bloom, they'll probably get stopped. Let's get this plant right back up to full strength. Then when it blooms, it will be a really good spike. Now you have to bear in mind the blooms on this are enormous, and on a good spike you could get half a dozen. That's a lot of energy. Yeah? So we'll try not to work it too hard. Let's get the growths going, get some more leaves, some more good leaves, and what will end up being a partial root system. It won't be a complete root system because it lost that. I'm going to have to do something with this shelf. Right, so that's that one. Next, I'm not getting out Derek's plants because all of those are struggling because they were undersized plants. And most had no roots, so they're just standard oncidium types with little or no roots. Standard recovery, put them in a moisture retentive media and do some of that. You know, oncidiums aren't too bad. As long as they've still got leaves, they will usually push out a new growth and get going again. Right, here's one for you. Right, reminder, let's look at this. What was wrong with Mr. Hairy? Those of you who follow the channel will remember what happened to this. What happened to this was it stopped growing and a couple of new growths sort of wilted and didn't really push on. They remained as tiny little new growths and there was no root activity. Now it was on a mount and the mount had a solid mass of moss with the bits of the plant coming out. But it was wrong. Something was wrong. And when you get a plant on a mount on a solid mass of moss like that, the only thing you can do to find out what's going on is get the moss out. So I started to tease some of the moss out, and the problem became very apparent very quickly. As the moss came out, it was taking chunks of the bark with it because it had rotted. So I took the plant off, and underneath the moss was rot. The actual cork bark had rotted. Now that's a rare thing. But in time, you know, it's going to go. So anyway, all the little pieces got remounted with some live moss on a solid piece of cork, and they are now starting to grow. Bearing that in mind, this is my Dendrobium glomeratum. Talk about deja vu. It's doing exactly the same thing, and I just keep watering it and letting it go when it needs dealing with, or it's going to die. Now it has produced a few new shoots. It won't grow, this one, it just will not get going. It has these two inferior canes. These are nowhere near the size that glomeratum cane should be, 3 times this size. Yeah, but at the base it started a few new growths, and 2 of those have aborted already, and it's starting some roots, including this one, which I bet has attached. Yes, it has. What's going on here? What is this? That looks exactly the same as what Mr. Hairy was working with. A solid mass of older moss. Yeah, I'm reasonably certain that the cork bark is on its way. Hasn't gone as far as Mr. Hairy's. So what do we have to do with this then? It's got to come off of the mount, tease off the old moss, try and look after this small root system here, and then put it back where? Would you put that on a mount again? Yeah? Or would you try it in a pot? Or would you try it on a new type of mount that we got as a Prezi not that long ago? Would this be a suitable candidate for a piece of that, perhaps? What would you do with these? Would you take them off so that you've got a nice neat little plant to grow on? Trouble is, if it does take off and it does grow on, these will get big. But all I want them to do is survive and continue to grow. Is that they've started. They've slowed right up recently, they're not moving. So we've got to deal with it. But now we're on a dendrobium. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about a cane that's solid, yeah, but no leaves. So it can't feed itself through those canes, can it? But they still work as storage units. They can still hold nutrients and hydration. They are backup. They're not the life and soul of the plant, they are backup, and the plant can draw down on those. That does work in reverse as well, because if the plant is struggling and it's trying to keep these pumped up, they could be doing more harm than good. So should they come off in this case and put all of the energy into those new growths and generating a root system? Not yet decided. Answers on a postcard. No, I'm joking. I don't want a ton of postcards through the flipping door. Yeah, but I mean, you know, what do you think? Yes, it's coming off. I've got a session where I've got stuff in moss that needs to come out, mainly in pots, but this one would be part of that because it's in moss and it needs to come out, but for a different reason. So what would you do with it after that? Would you pot it? Would you mount it? Would you try the new type of mount that came in as a Prezi? And would you take these old canes off? Or split the difference and take one off and leave one? So where would this end up? If this was yours and you decided that this was not working on this particular piece of cork bark, it's not the fact that it's mounted that's wrong. It's the fact that it's in that moss on this mount. That's the problem with it. So it's coming off. Then what? Then what would you do with that one? So that's that. That needs sorting out pretty quick, or I'm not going to have a plant to be working with. How's my little Bulbophyllum doing with its spikes? They're coming on. Coming on, slowly but surely. These are tiny. You know, we always play the game with the Dendrobium jenkinsii. I spot the spikes in the spring when they start, because they are minute. Well, these aren't much better, but you should be able to see these now. You can see the little spikes there, but they are tiny. Another one down here, just there on the end of my thumb. There's another one there. There's another one there, just starting. Oh, another one up the top. So it's going to have quite a few, but they're going to be staggered, and I can't for the life of me remember how long they last. But as Bulbophyllum blooms go, these are small, these are tiny, but they're what I call the upside down hand type. You know, lots of them in like a semicircle, like the Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry, but about a quarter of the size. So we should have blooms on that soon, and I'm looking forward to those. I haven't seen them for a while. Nothing wrong with the plant in that case. Let's have a look round. We've got these. Well, there's nothing really wrong with these. This is my Dendrobium lodogessii kikis. The only thing that's wrong with these is that they're not all growing. What can I do about that? Nothing. These are either going to grow on or they're not. And some are, and some aren't. And some may just be delayed and may start late. But we do have quite a few. See, now this is a principle that a lot of people have said I should try, and I've said I've seen it work, but I can't be bothered with it because of what happens. And that is with Dendrobium canes, you cut the canes off and lay them on damp moss. Yeah, just like that. So I've done it without intentionally doing it for the reason most people do. Most people do it to get kikis to grow, to produce new plants. From a kiki off of one of those canes, you've got a long wait to get a plant mature enough to actually bloom, which is why I can't be bothered with it. But that's what I've done here, sort of half intentionally, was I didn't lay these canes down to get kikis to grow. They already had kikis on them. I just wanted them to grow on, yeah? And eventually I should end up with a nice lot of canes coming out of this flat mount. That's how it's going to stay. It's not going to suddenly get turned up or anything like that. It's staying like that. And any canes that sort of head across the mount will probably get pinned down to produce some more kikis, because that's how this one grows. That's the difference. This is natural. Lodigessii is often found on the ground, not sort of growing in the dirt. It's not a dirt orchid by any means, but in a bit of leaf litter on a sort of rocky, mossy area. It'll get a hold, and then it produces kikis, and as the kikis weigh down the cane, they touch the ground and the leaf litter and root, and there starts a new plant. So they can form quite a mound of canes going off in all directions with bits that are rooting. That's what I'm doing there. So as I said, with some degree of success. I mean, there's one there that's probably not going to grow. That one's joined onto that one, and that one is growing. That was quite a big piece there. That's actually got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's joined on. That's got, that little cane there's got 5 kikis all growing. And then we've got another one over here. This one down here has got a new growth just started, and that one probably won't grow, although there is a bit of green coming out of the end of that cane there. So you know, that's sort of that's what I intended doing there. So there is no problem there. The only problem will be how big it can get, because whereas the mother plant was a single base with some canes coming off, on that mount I could have 10 bases with canes coming out. That could get a bit silly, at which point pieces could be separated off and passed on to others, new plants started, and they will be a reasonable size with their own roots. Right, another one. I think I've already said what I'm going to do with this, but as we're going over this sort of thing, and it's like I've said before, you know, it's different people join the channel at different times. I can't expect the same people to be watching every single video and follow things through, if you see what I mean. I mean, there may be some people out there that only ever watch the Sunday one. That's the one they like best, and haven't got time for any of the others. Some may just watch the repotting ones or the mountain ones. Right, so this is Dendrobium aphyllum, very much like a nosmum, especially in its growth habits and where it comes from and all that. And what we've got on here is a kiki outbreak. So this particular cane, let go, has got that kiki on the end that's just starting its roots. Yeah, so that's that one. And then that's it on that one. And then on this cane here, we've got a kiki down the bottom. That is in fact a plant. That's, you know, that's established now. And every time I water this plant, I don't just water the mount, I water these plants. So their roots get an absolute soaking to get them acclimatized to being wet. Yeah. And then this cane here also has one on the end of it that's pushing on. Those roots aren't very big yet. They're big enough with open leaves to support that. That can come off. And then right up the top here, we've got another one. So there we go. And we've also got the new cane on the main plant coming out. So Choices. All these kikis are coming off. They're not staying on the plant because when they're on the end of a cane and they reach full size, you've just doubled the length of that cane. It'll be hanging down on the blinking floor. So we can't let them stay. Yeah. So they've got to come off. Now when they come off, do they all go on a mount on their own and start a new mount with 5 or 6 new canes on that would grow into a mature plant with lots of blooms very, very quickly, and leave the mother plant to its own devices with its one new strong cane, which that's all it had last year, was one new strong cane which bloomed. Yeah. So those are the choices. Do we take the kikis off and start a new mount from scratch, yeah, with the kikis and grow them on? 2 years to bloom, I suspect, because they probably won't bloom on these canes. These canes will grow on and get quite large this year. Next year they'll grow new canes which might bloom the following spring, but probably won't. Probably have to wait yet another year, so that's quite a wait. Or do we put those kikis on this mount, knowing that this cane will bloom next year, while the kikis grow on around it, producing a much larger plant for future blooming, but maintaining one mount to water, one mount to look after, rather than 2. So that's the choices for that one. While I'm at it, if I decide that the kikis are going on this mount, I will hook as much of this old moss off as possible, but there isn't much of it there anyway. And that will also give me a chance to check underneath that the mount is okay. Yeah, so that's that one. As I said, kiki outbreak. You can see it hasn't done it before. But there again, that plant came from Alberto as a kiki. So the plant is prone to them. So it originated in Italy, you know. Travelled over to the UK and has been growing on ever since. So that's that one. I don't think there's any more mounts up there to worry about. No. Nothing in there. Right, so now we come on to the next set of plants. No, we don't. We come on to the coffee. Well, it's getting cold. How long have we been going here? Just over half an hour. Right, well, I'll show one and talk about the others. Right, new plant, and they are it's a Garachia Black Comet, which to everybody else is probably an Encyclia. But it's the upside down blooms. It's blooms that look like this in shape and form. Yeah, so they're upside down with the lip at the top like a hood. Yeah, the difference is the blooms on that are probably 4 times as big as these and very, very deep coloured. Hence the name Black Comet. They're not actually black, but they're an incredibly deep purple. So this set of plants are relatively new acquisitions, and you're going to come out. They are in compacted moss, which I can't stand. And this is an Encyclia. If that moss starts to break down, I will lose the roots. Now I've got a new growth growing here that's highly, it's just started some new roots, just started. So they haven't progressed much yet. But in this moss, we've got some very good roots on this plant. There's nothing wrong with these, but they have a limited life with that moss in the pot. Now when I'm watering this, I'm taking it out of the pot so that I can see what I'm doing, because the last thing I want is for this to be soggy. Damp, yes. Soggy, no. How much air do you think there is in that moss? Not around the edge, that's okay. In it, virtually none. And if you fill it up with water, there will be absolutely none. There will be no air spaces whatsoever for that root system. That's not going to last long. It'll survive for a while. As soon as that moss starts to go, the root system will be lost. So I've got some like this, that's one. Yeah, so what's going to happen to those? They are going to be a little difficult unless there's a new root system starting. Why would they be difficult? Let's say an encyclia will probably do quite well in a mix of cocoa husk and breaking them in for a friend. Cocoa husk and bark, small bark, possibly medium bark, possibly a bit of both, with some charcoal, without some charcoal, with some perlite. All that sort of nature of things would be fine for an encyclia. What do you think is going to happen to roots that have been in compacted moss and have been used to being pretty soaking wet when they come out of that environment and all that moss gets washed off and then they get put in a mix that's airy? It's a transition that many plants' root systems do not survive. It's a sort of problem, people who grow hydroponically or semi-hydroponic, that sort of thing, they will know this transition problem. And some plants take to it, absolutely take to it. So they take their plant out of bark, and put it in leca that wicks up, standing in a ½ inch of water or something or other. Some plants, the whole root system dies. Other plants take off and branch and go mad. But it's a transition from a media to another type of media that causes that transition problem. You can get the same problem like with those kikis. They are in effect aerial roots. Now if they didn't get water poured over them quite frequently, they would be genuine aerial roots. A lot of orchids will object to aerial roots being put in any form of media. Doesn't matter what it is, they just object because they're changing their role. As a root grows, it's either a root that attaches to stuff or it's a root that hangs in the air. Some orchids just don't like the change, so you have to go careful changing media. And one of the worst ones is changing from compacted moss to anything else. The media that it would take to probably quite nicely is some fresh moss not packed in quite so hard. Because then at least be used to that. But that's not an ideal media for that type of plant, quite honestly. If you live in a hot, dry place, that might be the best media since sliced bread, because it's going to hold the moisture, isn't it? How's that going to be in my winter when the temperatures drop down and day lengths shorten and the plant stops growing? Is that a good media to have those roots in? Open-ended question, answers on a postcard. Anyway, so that's one. And others that come into that category are two Masdevallias, and there's something else. Two Masdevallias and the Miltoniopsis that came from Burnham's, the Miltoniopsis Venus, the primary cross, and from a visit to Burnham's a while ago, an Oncidium that's also still in their own whatever's in the pot. It hasn't been repotted since I got it. So there's a little set of plants in pots to go out and be dealt with. But I don't think there's any others. So my hibiki needs a repot, and that's just an aging process. It's a matter of the fact that it's actually been in that pot a while now. It's only 2 years, and it is bark, but it was the old bark, and I'm beginning to realise that keeping that Orchiata bark for possibly as long as 3 or 4 years before I used it, it's not lasting as long as it should do if it was brand new, recently sort of imported. I think it comes from New Zealand originally. So if it was relatively fresh, produced in the last 3 to 6 months, and I've just opened the bag, that's how it will last an incredible amount of time. And I always thought was worth the extra money, but the stuff I've got now is old. Now, although it's dry, there must still be an aging process there because it's not lasting as long as it used to. And I've got some pots like that, and hibiki is one of them. I can actually get at it because it has a look. You can tell by the look, but if I leave it too much longer, it might start degrading the plant. Now, at the moment, this plant is pushing out new growth all over the place. therefore it must be producing roots. Yeah? Because some of the shoots are new, some are progressing, some are heading towards maturity. Somewhere in amongst that set is some roots. But if you look at the bark, it doesn't look nice. It's got some algae forming. Yeah, I mean, it's got a pot full of roots there. But notice where most of the roots are. They're up the top. And this one got mounded up. They're not pushing right down into that pot. And it is quite a fine root system, really. And with the algae starting, I just want that out of that pot. I want to do something with it. My problem is, probably why I keep putting it off, if I put it off too long it'll be too late, is that it is quite a fine root system, but it's a hell of a base. It's that big. You know, it fills the top of that pot. And that's going to be very difficult to get those roots down into media. You know, normally when you put a plant in a pot, you push the media down the side, don't you? Well, this has got a lot of its roots in the middle of the pot. I don't want a huge air hole in the middle. And also, looking at the way this is rooted, it needs to go in a shallow pot. So I'm wondering whether it would be better this time round only is to lift this out of the pot, shake as much off as possible but not go mad, so that not to disturb the roots too much, and put it in one of my wide shallow pots whereby it gets some fresh media underneath and all round the outside. But don't go too mad with what's in the middle of the pot. Now it could be when I take it out of the pot that the roots in the middle of the pot are not much good anyway, which takes away the need to worry about them, doesn't it? But anyway, that one needs doing. There are so many shoots on here that would be classed as kikis that have got roots on. I could start half a dozen new plants off of that. It's funny actually, Trey Saunders, who did our talk for Wessex on Saturday, he did a talk about a conservation type visit and looking for orchids in Sumatra, out the Philippines way, that arena. And on his visit they discovered new orchids, not orchids with an S, and found some that had never been photographed before, only described. And the trouble is, see, if you go back to the original orchid hunters and they described them, they did a drawing, sometimes with colours, you know, coloured in without going over the edges, like, you know. But yeah, so very, very interesting talk. But do you know what, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say then. What was I talking about? Media, pots. No, it's gone. It's an age thing or lack of coffee, one of the others. So I've been around my sister's most of the morning. I haven't had many of these today. That might come back to me in a minute. Trey Saunders. That's annoying me now. I hate it when that happens. No, that's gone. Oh well, we have moments. Do we worry about it? Not when it's occasionally like that. If it starts happening every half hour, then we'll worry about it. But then chances are I wouldn't worry about it anymore because I wouldn't know it was happening, would I? We say that. If I'm going to go do lally, it's not going to be my problem, is it? Because I won't know. It'll be somebody else's problem. What do you mean, if I go do lally? Cheeky. Right, okay, so that'll do today. If that comes back to me, I'll tag it on the end. But it was something about Trey, what he was saying. Discovering orchids. No, that really has gone. Chain of thought completely lost. We will see whether that comes back or not. Probably not. But anyway, as you can see, there's going to be some kitchen time coming up. Plants to come out of moss. Delicate root systems as a consequence, so they'll probably get the gentlest of touches and then be washed under the tap to get the worst of that moss off. This those days are gone. We don't do that anymore. realise how much damage could be being done, not by snapping roots necessarily, but by bruising and causing damage to the velamen that can then start issues with the roots in the pot. So we don't do that anymore. And obviously there's one mount to do. Plus there's the kikis on the mount to sort out. Are they going on the same mount? Are they going on a different one? So there's obviously some work to do out in the kitchen coming up, because I know some people that's their favourite type video. And yeah, just some thoughts really about looking at plants that have been a problem. And in one case with the hibiki, it could become a problem if I don't get on and deal with it. And you know, a problem left till tomorrow could be a bigger problem or more than one. So with our orchids, I think, you know, when you decide that something needs dealing with, it does pay to get on with it. If I go back historically over all my time, I've lost more plants by not doing stuff than I have by actually getting on and doing stuff. So putting off repotting, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, in some of my plants, I've even been frightened to repot them because they had some value, and you sort of think, God, that, you know, that was potted up by a professional, I'm going to mess that up. So you leave it, and by leaving it, you lose the plant, or nearly lose the plant in some cases. So I think problems that are spotted need to be dealt with. And if you take that in as part of your mindset, okay, there's an element of work involved to sort these problems out, but it's better than losing the plant, which is it's one of the options that happens through not getting on and dealing with problems when you've spotted them. There will be problems in orchid collections that take the plant down and then you spot the problem. I've had some of them as well. It's like that Vanda that we started with. I could see there was a problem, but I couldn't see what it was. Those insects were minute. They were not visible to the naked eye. I had to use the magnifying glass to even see them. And I still don't know what the hell they were. I know what they became, dead, but I don't know what they were. Anyway, that's today's chat. I didn't drag Fluffy Cat down, or non-Fluffy Cat. I can't really call him Fluffy Cat anymore, maybe again one day, because he's asleep. You know, he's had a bit of an ordeal, travelling, you know, so if he wants to sleep during the day, he's up on the end of my bed at the moment. He's welcome to stay there. At some point, he's going to walk in view, you know, and I can pick him up and you can all say hello. But I'm not going to wake him up to do that specifically. That just seems, you know, if somebody woke me up to do that, they probably regret it. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.